Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Cheli Beis and we will be learning today Mir Hashem Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Beis. We began learning yesterday Siman Kuf Samach Tes and we're going to pick up today on Ayin Aleph Amid Aleph, 2 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch. Really the first word of the Mechaber on the second to last line on Ayin Aleph Amid Aleph, the word Va'aser. Before we begin our learning today, our learning should be a schus for Achei Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanasudim Batzar Ubashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yirachem Alehem Ve'yitziem Mitzar L'Lervacha Me'afel L'Ira U'Mishibed L'Geula Hashta Bagala U'Zman Karev V'Nemar Amen. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema for our real Yosef ben Miriam Rezel and for Meir ben Chayesara, who are both in need of continued rachamei shamayim. So we began yesterday Siman Kuf Samach Tes, and we've been discussing the halachas that pertain to the shamish, to the waiter who's coming and serving the food by a suda. And one of the primary halachas that we learned yesterday is that when you have a wait staff or a kitchen staff that is exposed to the food that you're going to be eating, and if they do not have an expectation of being able to partake of that food, then there are foods that you need to share with them. Why is that? Because the Chazal tell us that if somebody is exposed to a food, he's exposed to a very aromatic food or to a food that has a very pungent aroma, what happens is the person automatically gets a tremendous desire for that food. And if he's not able to fulfill that desire, if it goes unfulfilled, then he could come to sakana. Therefore, the halacha is, if you have a wait staff or a kitchen staff that's being exposed to the delicious aroma of your prime rib, or to the very pungent aroma of some kind of a pungent dish that you have, you must give them a taste of that dish so that they should not come to sakana. Now, having learnt that there is this halacha that requires you to give food to the shamish, to give food to the waitstaff, now we have a halacha here at the end of Sif Aleph, says the Mechaber, Va'aser litein loy prusas pas. You're not allowed to give a piece of bread to the shamish, ela imkein yodea bay shenat al yadav, unless you know that he washed netilas yadayim. Now, first thing that I just want to point out is that when we're speaking about pas, we're not speaking about something which is exceptionally aromatic. We're not talking about something that's pungent. Yet we see that somebody is going to give the shamish pas. That's just something that we should keep in mind for later on in today's shir. In any case, what the Mechaber says is, if you're sitting at a suda and you have a Yiddish shamish and you want to give the shamish some bread, you cannot give him bread unless you know that he washed the netilas yadayim. If you don't know that he washed the netilas yadayim and you give him bread, you might potentially be over on liftei iver loisitein mechshel. Maybe you'll give him a piece of bread and he'll eat the piece of bread without washing. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah and see how the Mishnah Berurah addresses this. Mishnah Berurah is cut in Tes. The Chavetz Chaim says, Aser litein loy. You're not allowed to give bread. Pirush, says the Chavetz Chaim, who are you giving this bread to? La hashamish. You can't give some bread to the waiter unless you know that he washed netilas yadayim. Now the Chavetz Chaim is going to answer the question that we have, which is, why should we be worried that the shamish is going to eat the pas without netilas yadayim? Doesn't everybody know that you need netilas yadayim before you eat bread? So says the Chavetz Chaim, the rationale of this halacha is techayshinan, because we are concerned Shema mitoich tirdasai. Maybe out of his distraction, he's in the middle of fulfilling a job. He's serving a meal. So he's going around the table. He's asking everybody what foods they want. He's got to keep track of everything. Now somebody offers him a piece of bread. Out of his tirda, out of his distraction, he might come to eat the bread without Netilas Yadayim. So again, let's see it inside. The Chayshinon, the basis of this halacha is that we are concerned, Shema mitark tirdasai, may be due to his distraction from having to fulfill the requirements of his job and his busyness, Yishkach milital yadav. He'll forget to wash Netilas Yadayim, and he'll wash without Netilas Yadayim. Now says the Chavetz Chaim, if that's the background of this halacha, if the reason why we cannot give bread to the shamish is because the shamish is distracted, and since he's busy and distracted, we have to be concerned that he might inadvertently eat the pas without Netilas Yadayim, in that case, says the Chavetz Chaim, avol be'acher, if we're talking about stamayid, not a waiter, not somebody who's tarid, not somebody who's busy, in that case, we wouldn't have to worry. So, can you give bread to stam an individual if you don't know that he washed the Netilas Yadayim? Sure you can. Why? Because everybody knows that you have to wash the Netilas Yadayim before you eat pas. I'm not concerned that I might give Ruvain a piece of bread and he might come to eat it without the Netilas Yadayim. This halacha over here, this halacha is talking about a waiter. A waiter is very busy and he's very distracted. Him, we have to worry that he might come to eat without Netilas Yadayim. Unless you're dealing with a person and you see that he intends to eat the bread without Netilas Yadayim. If you're dealing with a fry fellow and you see that he's planning on eating pas without Netilas Yadayim, then in Chirami you can't give him pas. Don't be over on Luftei Iver. Don't give him pas so that he should eat it without Netilas Yadayim. So right away, what we see over here so far is we have the Mechaber who told us this halacha, and he's bringing this halacha from a Gemara in Chulin on Kov Zayin Amud Aleph. I have the Gemara over here, the Gemara in Chulin on Kov Zayin Amud Aleph. Oh, actually, if I'm not going to see it quickly, I'm not going to search for it. Oh, I actually don't see it here. Oh, wait, maybe it's over here. Here, right over here. Tana Rabbanon. Lo yitein adam prusa l'shamish. No, wrong one. Wrong one. Ah, here it is. Amar Reb Zera Amar Rav, Lo yitein adam prusa l'sach piv shal shamish, elim ken yedeh b'yishenayt al yadav. Don't give the shamish a piece of bread unless you know that he washed the Netilas Yadayim. So this halacha comes from the Gemara in Chulin, Kov Zayin Amud Aleph. The Mishnah Berurah tells me that the reason for the halacha is, and it's only negeya to a shamish, we're afraid that the shamish is busy and distracted, so he might come to eat without the Netilas Yadayim. But stam a person, you could give bread, even if you don't know if he washed, because certainly if he wants to eat the bread, he's going to wash. But then says the Mishnah Berurah, V'yesh machmirin bazeh. The Mishnah Berurah says there are those that are machmir and will not give bread even to a regular person unless they know that he did not wash the Netilas Yadayim. Now, what's very critical over here is, if you take a look at the Ois Cotton Yud Beis of the Sha'ar Tzion, you'll see that the Mishnah Berurah is bringing this down from the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina. Now, that's going to be very important to know that this comes from Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina. Okay, so what we see over here so far is we have a machlokes brought down here in the Mishnah Berurah. Does this halacha apply to stamayid or not? The first opinion is it's only by a shamish that we have to be concerned that he might come to eat without the Netilas Yadayim. But by a regular person, we don't have to be concerned. But then we have the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina who says that this halacha applies to anybody. You're not allowed to give bread to anybody unless you know that they washed the Netilas Yadayim. Ends off the Mishnah Berurah here is cutting test, and he says, however, kishehu noisid b'taris tzedakah. Let's say you're giving bread as tzedakah to an ani, and you don't know if the ani washed the Netilas Yadayim or not. Says the Mishnah Berurah, kishehu noisid b'taris tzedakah. If you're giving the bread as tzedakah to an ani, bevada yesh lahakal, then you could be makel, and you could give him bread even if you do not know that he washed the tilas yadayim, kidal kamei b'sif beis b'hagah, like we're about to see in Sif Beis in the Hagah. So now, based on that, let's go 2 lines off the bottom near the end of the line in the Shulchan Aruch, and let's go to Sif Beis, where we have another halacha that flows out of the halacha that we just learned. Now remember, the first halacha that we learned, that you can't give bread to the shamish unless you know that he washed the tilas yadayim, that's based on a Gemara in Chulin. So that's based on a memra, I think it was in the name of Rav. Right? Yes, Amar Reb Zera Amar Rav. So this was a memra of Rav in the Gemara in Chulin, that you cannot give food to the you can't give bread to the shamish unless you know that he washed. Now comes along Sif Beis here in the Shulchan Aruch. It says to Mechaber, Lo yitain le'echel, you should not give any food to somebody to eat, unless you're giving it to somebody who you know is going to make a bracha. You want to give somebody food, you want to give a yid food, don't give a yid food unless you know that he's a yid that's going to make a bracha. But if you have somebody who's not Shabbat Torah or mitzvahs, don't give him food. You don't know that he's going to make a bracha, don't give him food. By giving him food, you might be over on Liftei Iver. Maybe you'll give him food and he'll eat it without a bracha. So that's the halacha of the Mechaber over here. Lo yiten lechel. Don't give food to eat. Ela lemisha yideh b'shevarech. Only to somebody who you know is going to make a bracha. Now let's take a look right away at the Biur Halacha. Dibra Maschel lemisha yideh b'shevarech, says the Chavetz Chaim. Umistabre. It makes sense to say to be muchsik lekosher. If you have a from a yid who has a cheskes kashrus, you have somebody standing over here with a yarmulke and tzitzits and everything else, certainly you could give him food. You don't have to question him first and say, are you going to make a bracha? No, he's a from a yid. He has a cheskes kashrus. Of course he's going to make a bracha. It's enough to know that the person that you're giving food to is a muchzik lekosher, that he has a cheskes kashrus. He's a from a yid. So you don't have to interrogate him. But to give food to somebody who doesn't look like a from yid, you don't know that he's going to make a bracha. Says the Mechaber, don't give him food. Now, before we see the Mishnah Berurah, let's just see the Ramah. Says the Ramah on the bottom line here, V'yesh mekilim, there are those that are mekel, im noisen la'ani b'teres tzedakah. He brings down over here from the Rabbeinu Yoina and Masechtas Brachas, that if you're giving the food as tzedakah, you could be mekel, and even if you don't know for sure that he's going to make a bracha, you have a suffix whether or not he's going to make a bracha, you could give him the food anyway, al tzedakah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting yud. Lo yitein lechel. Now, the Mishnah Berurah says, where does this halacha come from? Remember, the halacha that you can't give the shamish bread unless you know that he washed, that's a Gemara in Chulin, Kov Zayin Abed Beis, that's a memra of Rav. But this halacha here, that you can't give food to anybody to eat unless you know that he's going to make a bracha, that's not a Gemara. So what's the source of that halacha? Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Yud, Nilmoid misif hakodim. This halacha is an extension of the halacha of the previous sif. In the previous sif, we said you can't give the shamish bread unless you know that he washed. As an extension of that, says the Mechaber, the same way you can't give the waiter bread unless you know that he washed, you can't give a cookie to a yid unless you know he's going to make a bracha. This halacha naturally flows out of the previous halacha. But says the Mishnah Berurah, not so fast. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Nilmaid misif hakodim. This halacha is an extension of the halacha of the previous sif. There's no makar for it in the Gemara, but it seems to flow naturally from the halacha of Sif Aleph. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, Lefi Svara Kamaisa, according to the first daya that we learned about in Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Tes, the Dafka Lahashamish Mishum Tirda, we learned in Sif Tes 2 opinions. There's one opinion that says, why aren't you allowed to give the waiter bread unless you know that he washed? Because he's tarud. because he's very busy and he's very distracted. So by the shamish, there's a reason why we have to be concerned that he might not wash. But a regular person is not distracted. We don't have to worry that he might not wash. Says the Chavetz Chaim now in Sif Beis, this halacha of Sif Beis, that you can't give a regular person a cookie unless you know that he's gonna make a bracha. A regular person is not distracted. A regular person is not busy. Why should I be chayshish that he's not going to make a bracha? So the Chavetz Chaim says, look, the halacha of Sif Aleph that you can't give bread to the waiter unless you know he's going to wash, that's a Gemara in Chulin on Kav Zayin Amud Beis. The halacha of Sif Beis that you can't give an ordinary person a cookie unless you know he's going to make a bracha, that doesn't have a source in Chazal. So that's only an outgrowth of the halacha of Sif Aleph. But it's only a natural outgrowth of the halacha in Sif Aleph according to the second opinion, who says that you're not allowed to give anybody bread unless you know that he washed. So then, the same way you're not allowed to give anybody bread unless you know that he washed, you're not allowed to give anybody a cookie unless you know that he's going to make a bracha. But according to the Chari Adam and others, who say that the halacha that you can't give bread to the waiter is only negeya to a waiter, because a waiter is distracted and busy, then the halacha of Sif Beis is not a natural outgrowth of the halacha of Sif Aleph. And therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, according to the first opinion in Mishnah Berurah is cut and test, where that halacha only is negeya to a waiter, in kain ein mekarladin zeh. Then there's no source for this halacha in Sif Beis. Unless you know that you're dealing with a friar fellow who's not going to make a bracha. Then everybody would agree that you can't give him a cookie. Everybody would agree you can't give a cookie to somebody who you know isn't going to make a bracha. That we know. But to say that you can't give a cookie to somebody when you have a suffix if he's going to make a bracha or not, why not? Why not? By a shamish, you can't give him bread because he's busy. There's reason to believe he won't make a bracha. But by a regular person, why do you have to be chayshish that he's not going to make a bracha? Now, what's interesting is, if you take a look at the Be'er HaGoyla, Ois Katan Daled, this halacha in Sif Beis, the Be'er HaGoyla says, what's the source? Rabbeinu Yoina b'soif parak ches de brachas b'shem yesh omer. So this halacha of Sif Beis is a Rabbeinu Yoina. Who is the opinion that the halacha of Sif Aleph that you can't give bread to the waiter unless you know that he didn't wash the Tilas Yadayim, unless you know that he washed the Tilas Yadayim? Who is the Shita that says that applies to everybody? Says the Chavetz Chaim in Sharet Tzion's Cut Yud Beis, Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina. So now it all comes together. Now it all makes sense. The Rabbeinu Yoina holds that the halacha of Sif Aleph applies to everybody, not just the shamish. Rabbeinu Yoina holds you're not allowed to give bread to somebody unless you know that he washed. Whether he's a waiter and he's busy or a normal person. You want to give bread to somebody, you have to ask him, did you wash? Are you going to wash? But otherwise you can't give him bread. So too the Rabbeinu would say, okay, so we learn from there that you're not allowed to give food to somebody to eat unless you know that he makes a bracha. Indeed, if you take a look at the Rabbeinu Yoina in the Sechtas Brachas, the Rabbeinu Yoina says, Lo yitein adam prusa l'shamish, you can't give a piece of bread to the waiter, elim ken yedea b'ishanat yadav, unless you know that he washed. Says the Rabbeinu Yoina, yesh l'meidin mikan, we could learn out from here, she'ein roy laseis lechol, that you can't give food to eat, ela l'misha yedea b'isha yavarich, unless you know that you're giving it to somebody who's going to make a bracha. So it's the Rabbeinu Yoina l'shitasa. The Rabbeinu Yoina is going to hold that the halacha of giving bread to somebody, and you can't give it to him unless you know that he washed, applies to everybody. And therefore we could learn from there that you can't give food to eat to anybody unless you know that he's going to make a bracha. Okay. Eiskat Yud Aleph. Then we had the Ramah that said, but there's an exception if you're giving food to somebody b'teiras tzedakah. If you're giving food to somebody b'teiras tzedakah, you want to give an ani, a yid, a piece of bread, you're not mechuyev to know that he washed, and you're not mechuyev to know that he's going to make a bracha. Why? Says the Chavetz Chaim, the loy mafki'inan mitzvahs tzedakah, we're not going to refrain from being mekayim the mitzvah say daraisa of tzedakah b'shvil chash shema lo yivarech, because of a suffix that the ani might not make a bracha. That we're not going to do. Even though by the shamish we don't give him bread unless we know that he washed. Hasam, which is also a suffix. Hasam hanisina, turning tayin aleph of a base. Hasam hanisina lav b'teretz tzedakahu. Over there, you're not giving the shamish his bread out of a mitzvah say of tzedakah. You're giving it to him because you owe it to him. You're giving it to him because he's serving you at the table. However, if you know that the ani is certainly not going to make a bracha, then you're not allowed to give him bread, even to be mekayim the mitzvah of tzedakah. However, this is only true if the ani is not going to make a bracha out of rishus. But if he's not going to make a bracha simply because he can't, he doesn't know how, the Pri Megadim says we're not going to refrain from the mitzvah of tzedakah because the ani is not able to make a bracha. Now, this halacha brings up all sorts of shilos, especially in the realm of kiruv. You have, let's say, guests that are not from, they're not Shabbat Torah mitzvahs. How are you allowed to give them food if they're not going to make a bracha? What if you have a business partner who's not from, and you sit down and you have lunch together, and you want to give him something, give him some food, he's not going to make a bracha? It's a long discussion. There is an interesting Dirshu footnote over here. I think it was Dirshu footnote number 6 that goes through various shittas in the Paiskim. I'm not going to go through it right now. Okay. Ayin Aleph Amid Beis, top line, Sif Gimel. Says the Mechaber, Hashamish mevarech boirei pri hagafen al kol kais v'kais sheyitnu loy. If the waiter is serving the meal and he comes in by the farshpais, he comes in to serve the appetizer, and they offer him a cup of wine. So he'll take the cup of wine, he'll make a boirei pri hagafen, he'll drink some wine. Now he goes back to the kitchen to start getting the entrees, the main dish, ready. Now, let's say you're sitting and you're eating bar yasuda. If you make a boirei pri hagafen on 1 cup of wine, that's it. You're covered for the rest of the suda. You're not going to make another boirei pri hagafen. Not only that, you're not even going to make a shahakal on a glass of water. Once you make a boirei pri hagafen on a glass of wine, the boirei pri hagafen patters all other beverages the same way hamaitzi patters all other foods. So certainly, by a normal person sitting at a suda, once he makes 1 boirei pri hagafen, he's not going to make another boirei pri hagafen, but the waiter has to make a new boirei pri hagafen every time they offer him another cup of wine. Why? Says the Mechaber, very simple. Hashamish mevarech boirei pri hagafen al kol kais v'kais sheyitnu loy. The waiter has to make a new boirei pri hagafen every time they offer him a cup of wine, lefi shehu kinimlach, because he is like somebody who is mesiach das between each glass of wine. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Gimel, Eis Katan Yud Beis, shehu kinimlach, she'enei yadayim yitnu loy oid. Because the waiter has no way of knowing when he makes the first boirei pri hagafen and he drinks the first cup of wine that he was given, he doesn't have the ability to take any additional wine later in the Suda. It's not his Suda. It's not his wine. He's Tali al Das Acherim. And he doesn't know for sure that anybody is going to offer him any more wine. So when he makes that first boirei pri hagafen, min hastam, by default, we don't assume that bracha covers anything beyond the first glass of wine that he's going to get. Because he has no way of knowing that he's going to get another glass of wine, and it's not up to him to take another glass of wine. So he's offered a glass of wine, he makes hagafen, he drinks his glass of wine. If he's lucky enough that 20 minutes later they offer him another glass of wine, so this is something new. It's a new glass of wine. It's a new opportunity to drink. He's got to make a new boirei pri hagafen. Because he was Mesiach Das between the two. Why was he Mesiach Das? Because he had no way of knowing that the second glass was going to come. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. He has no way of knowing that they're going to give him more. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, but if he's a smart cookie, this waiter, and when they offer him the first glass of wine, he has das, that I'm making a bracha now that should cover any other wine that they give me during the Suda. I don't know if they're going to or they're not going to, but maybe they will. So I am having das beferish, that my hagafen now should cover any additional wines that come in during the Suda, ein tzarich levarich. Then the Mishnah Berurah paskins he does not have to make a new hagafen on any wine that comes later on in the Suda. Now, if you look at Sharet Sinai's Cut Yud Gimel, he quotes this for the Magen Avram, Usha'ar harbe achrayim, many other achrayim shehizkartim b'Siman Kuf Tzadik, that I'm going to list in Siman Kuf Tzadik Sif Hey, b'Sharet Sinai, u'deloi kitaz, and this is not like the Taz. If you take a look at the Biur Halacha, Ois Katan Hey, in the middle of that Ois Katan of the Be'er Heitiv, I'm sorry, I said Biur Halacha, I meant Be'er Heitiv. If you take a look at the Be'er Heitiv, Ois Katan Hey, in the brackets, the Be'er Heitiv says, Aval Taz b'Siman Kuf Ayin Tes Kasav. The Taz writes at Siman Kuf Ayin Tes, Deloi Mahani Daitoi, that the das of the waiter, that his Bayr Priagafen should cover any other wine that might come during the Suda, is not efficacious. That doesn't work. Because, very nice, you have das. You have das on what? You have no way of knowing that you're going to get more wine. You can't have das on something that you have no way of knowing of whether it's going to come or not. So says the Taz, and the Be'er Heitiv says tzarich iyun ludina. But the Chavetz Chaim we see is being machriya like the Magen Avram, which is pretty typical for the Mishnah Berurah, that he's machriya like the Magen Avram against the Taz, especially when he has the backup of so many other achrayim. So the Mishnah Berurah is machriya like the Magen Avram, and it comes out like this. If they give the waiter a cup of wine by the appetizer, and he doesn't have any das beferish, he just makes a bari priagafen and he drinks that cup of wine, then if they offer him another cup of wine by the main dish, he has to make a new bracha. Why? Because min hastam, his das was not on the second cup. Why? Because he had no way of knowing if the second cup was going to come. But if he had das beferish by the appetizer, when he made the hagafen on the cup that he got by the appetizer, that it should cover any other wine that he gets during the Suda, then the Mishnah Berurah holds that that would be effective, and he wouldn't have to make another Beirei Peri hagafen. Says the Mechaber Weiter. Second line down, near the beginning of the line, Ubraka achroina einem avarach ela lebesayf. When he makes the Beirei Peri hagafen during the appetizer, and he drinks the first cup of wine, he doesn't have to right away go ahead and make an ala gefen val priya gefen. He could wait till the end of the Suda to make the nach bracha. And if he's fortunate enough to get more glasses of wine during the Suda, so then the ala gefen, then he makes it. The end of the Suda will cover all the cups of wine that he got. Continues the Mechaber. Ve'enoi tzarech levarech al kol prusa uprusa, but while we're saying that the waiter has to make a new bari priagafen on every cup of wine that he gets, but, says the Mechaber, einoi tzarech levarech al kol prusa uprusa, he doesn't have to make another bracha on every piece of bread. Now it says here prusa, which means a piece. The Mishnah Berurah is going to say that this means bread. Einoi tzarech levarech al kol prusa uprusa. He doesn't have to make a new amoitzi on every piece of bread that he gets. Im yesh adam chashav basuda. If there's a Talmid Chacham by the Suda. If the waiter is serving a table and there's a Talmid Chacham by the table and they offer him a piece of bread and he washed, he could eat that piece of bread on a hamoitzi and he doesn't have to make a new hamoitzi if they offer him more bread. Why? Because if there's an adam chashav at the table, he could rest assured that he's going to get as much bread as he wants. And since he could rest assured that he's going to get as much bread as he wants, so then his first hamoitzi covers all the bread that he's going to get for the rest of the Suda. Because he has das that he's going to get more bread. But v'im ein adam chashav b'suda, if there isn't a Talmid Chacham at the Suda, then tzarich levarcha kol prusa uprusa, then he has to make a new bracha of hamoitzi on every piece of bread that he gets, kemoi al hayayin, the same way he has to make a new hagafen on every drink of wine that he gets. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Gimel Adam Chashav. The Mistama HaAdam Chashav Yazir, Mishnah Berurah explains the reason is because we assume that an Adam Chashav, a Talmid Chacham, is going to be careful, Sheyintnu loy kol tzarcha mipas, that he's going to give the waiter as much bread as he wants, ve'enay nimlach mizeh, and the waiter is not Mesiach Das from bread. He knows there's an Adam Chashav at the table. He knows the Adam Chashav is going to make sure that he gets as much bread as he wants. So he's not a Nimlach. He's not Mesiach Das. He knows he's going to get more bread. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, Umidinakat ha-mechaber pas. From the fact that the Mechaber says that we're talking about bread, he says, She'edeh she'itnu loy kol tzarcha mipas. Mashma, the implication is, the dafka bipas yazir ha-Talmid Chacham es ha-mesubin she'itnu loy. It's only bread that the Talmid Chacham is going to make sure that the waiter gets as much as he wants. V'hu adin kol davar de'ispei reicha v'kiyua, or anything else that has a strong aroma or a pungent aroma, which the halacha specifies we must give the waiter. But the chocolate chip cookies, that's only a midas chasidus. That the shamash would have to make a new bracha on every time he eats it, because he has no way of knowing that he's going to get additional chocolate chip cookies. Because the Taz says, who says the Talmid Chacham is going to make sure that he gets all the chocolate chip cookies that he wants? To make sure that he's going to get prime rib, if he has an acute desire for the prime rib, that the Talmid Chacham is going to make sure happens because of the halacha that we learned yesterday, that if the waiter has a strong desire for the prime rib, you have to make sure to give him some. To make sure that he's going to get enough pas, that, even though we didn't have a source for it yet, but that, the Mechaber says, an Adam Chashav is zicha going to make sure that somebody at the table who's hungry is going to get as much pas as he wants. But chocolate chip cookies? Mashed potatoes? Who says that even the Adam Chashav, who says he's going to make sure that the waiter gets as much mashed potatoes as he wants? But the Magen Yibarim takes issue with this. And the main reason the Magen Yibarim takes issue with this is very simple. The Magen Yibarim says like this: we learned a halacha yesterday that if the waiter is exposed to a food that has a strong aroma or to a pungent food, you have to give him. If he wants, you have to give him. So that we could say a Talmid Chacham is going to do based on that halacha. Pas, there's no halacha anywhere that says that when the waiter is serving the meal, you have to give him as much pas as he wants. We never had such a halacha. There's no makar for that. Yet the Mechaber says, if there's an Adam Chashav by the table, the Adam Chashav is going to make sure that the waiter gets as much pas as he wants. Why? So, says the Magen Yibarim, the reason is simple. Because a Talmid Chacham is a mensch. And a mensch, if there's a yid serving, and the yid is hungry, and you can see that the yid wants food, a Talmid Chacham is going to make sure that he gets at least bread, as much bread as he wants. It's stam derech eretz. It's not based on a halacha that you must give him bread. It's derech eretz. So says the Magen Yibarim, if the Mechaber is telling me that if there's an Adam Chashav, you can make sure the waiter could be yoitze with one hamoitzi on the pas, because he knows that out of derech eretz the Talmid Chacham is going to give him as much pas as he wants, then he could also rest assured that the Talmid Chacham out of derech eretz is going to give him mashed potatoes too. Because no Talmid Chacham, no Adam Chashav is going to look at a Yiddish waiter who's craving foods on the table and not give him. So therefore, it covers not just pas and not just things with aromas or pungent aromas. It covers all the food on the table. Finally, let's close out this Siman with the words of the Ramah. Says the Ramah Hagah, Shnayim shahayu oichlin biyachad. Let's say there are two Yidden that are sitting and eating together, and they have a Yiddish waiter. Is the Yiddish waiter allowed to join them without reshus? Is he allowed to just mach hamish, sit down by the table and join them by the Suda? Says the Rama, yes. Shnayim shayu oichlin biyachad, if two Yidden were eating together, hashamish oichel imahem b'loy netilas reshus. The waiter could sit down and join them without getting permission. You know why? Kedei sheyitztarfu lezimun. Because one can assume that the two people that are eating would be very happy for their benching to be elevated to benching with a mezumin. And by the Yiddish waiter sitting down and eating with them, he's giving them the opportunity. He's affording them the opportunity to bench with zimun. V'ayin l'kaman siman kuf ayin sif chaf aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting Yudalit Shtayim Shayu Eichlin, Ritzayna Loimar Midi de Mechayiv Bezimun. If the two people washed and they're eating food, that would have a chiyuv of zimun. But if they're sitting down and they're eating pizza, there's no chiyuv of zimun. So then you can't just automatically join them because you're not doing anything for them. Umistabra, it makes sense to say, says the Chavetz Chaim, de'ein loy rishos rak lechol ma'at. When we say that he's allowed to sit down and join them without permission, he's allowed to sit down and join them without permission, but he can't sit down and chow down on all the food. He can eat a little bit, kedei she'ez chayiv b'zimun, so that he should create a chiyav zimun v'yitztaref imahem, and be mitztaref with them for benching. We're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Siman Kofayin. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discussing limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's for Puras Parnasa, Shaduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Koyel Tzedek. B'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.